Hello, this is Annie Jones again for critical thinking. And this week we were in chapter 10, recapturing the intellectual life in the church. I will say I do agree with most of Moreland's thesis about how the intellectualism has been taken out of the church. I think that's been something I've been concerned about personally, probably since I was a little kid and had questions that no one could answer reasonably for me. But some of the different things that I know Moreland talked about in this chapter, as far as making some changes to some of these things, I remember, and it's probably one of the most talked about changes probably in this group, and when he began to talk about no senior pastor, by the church being ran by a group of elders. And I think, me personally, I think that would be a great idea because, one, we have put too much pressure and we put too much emphasis on the pastor. But another thing came to mind for me was in Ephesians 4, where he talks about Ephesians 4:11, and he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers. But it says for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. But what stands out to me is it says, till we all come into the unity of the faith. Till. So for me, that seems like those titles or those positions in the church should only last so long. They should only be until we all come into the unity of the faith. So that tells me that, those teachers have a purpose. They have something to do in the church, of course, because God was gracious enough to give those gifts. But they shouldn't be completely relied on. Those are just to help us all come into the same understanding, come into the same unity of faith. And at some point, we shouldn't have to rely on those titles any longer. I see it that way. So I kind of agree with him with maybe having a group of elders, or maybe a pastor of pastors, something like that, in the church. And one other thing that he talked about, the distinction between forms and functions. I'll honestly say I got a little tripped up there with understanding what those differences are. And then sermons. I do know that, yes, most pastors do not, or maybe they fear giving the opportunity to let other elders minister in the church. But I do believe that, I don't know about maybe 26 cutting it completely in half, but I do agree with giving the other elders and giving the other ministers an opportunity to share the gift that God gave them to help out, with the congregation, because some people, words are different, some people's presentation are different, charisma are different, which allows different people in the church to capture different information, maybe even more information differently when they're listening in. The church library, I totally agree with doing something like that. I did write that this week, that I think most people, or at least I would, feel safer getting a book from the church library, someplace where I feel like the pastor or the leaders there have endorsed certain books, where they make it feel a little safer, versus, me just going into a bookstore or a friend referring a book that may not be good for my own edification, my own exhortation, my own, uplifting, because a lot of times people are, as the scripture said, carried about with every wind of doctrine. If it sounds good, most people will go with it. So having a church library, I think, is a great idea. And sometimes I think those great ideas from a church library could spin off into church small groups, book clubs, things like that, where people get a chance to banter back and forth on those topics and to have those intellectual conversations, which is sometimes necessary to stretch and to challenge us to talk and to make sure we understand what we're learning. Because a lot of times, like I said, on Sundays, there's this declaration of the word, there's this proclamation that goes out, and it's hard to even get a response, because if If your brain didn't catch it, you just didn't catch it. And you have to catch stuff like that in your smaller groups where you get a chance to ask those questions. You get a chance to rebuttal. You get a chance to think. You get a chance to put a rhyme and reason to why someone said a particular thing. Because the Bible does say, with all thy getting, please get an understanding. And I agree that we need to get that understanding. But I agree with, honestly, there's really been nothing that I disagree with in Moreland's book. It's been speaking to me. It's been just an echo of questions and ideas and problems that I've had my entire, church life. So it's been really refreshing to read someone to be able to audibly express these things and letting me know I'm not alone in this. So that's what I feel this week. Talk to you soon.